Hello, I'm Jennifer Lee, Lead Admin Evangelist at Salesforce, and your host for Automate This. And we're starting off the month with a new episode. Automate This is a monthly series showcasing trailblazers like you doing some amazing things with automation. So engage with us during the live stream or in the chat, or in the comments afterwards. And the best way to be notified when we live stream is to set the reminder on the live stream episode page, and you get a email reminder the day of the event. And to interact with us during the live stream, post your comments in the chat and interact with the other viewers. To interact with me or my guest presenters today, start your question with a Q:, so we can quickly scan through and identify and answer those questions during the Q&A section. All right, so here's what you're going to learn today from our two guest presenters. So 3 things you will learn from Megesh's presentation is what is MuleSoft Composer and how to use it, how to visualize flow automation solutions using MuleSoft Composer and Salesforce, and how to build end-to-end flow automation solutions using Salesforce Experience Cloud, MuleSoft Composer, and Slack. And the 3 things we'll learn from Shanks today is how to get Salesforce and MuleSoft Composer to play nice with each other, how to pass information from Salesforce into MuleSoft Composer to be used in the Composer flow, and creative workarounds to get your solution to work. So I'm excited to have on today's broadcast 2 Muleys in the house, Andrew Shanks and Meghesh Shenoy. So welcome. We had fellow Muleys on earlier this year, Jen Cole and Myra Wilson. So now we're representing the male Muleys in this episode. Welcome, Shanks and Meghesh, to Automate This.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Welcome.
All right. So, Meghesh, this is your first time on Automate This. I know you're pretty involved in the MuleSoft community. Can you share with us what you do?
Starting with, I speak at community events, the local meetup groups, as well as I had the opportunity to speak at a major Salesforce event in India called Salesforce Developer Days in Pune. It was this year. Then apart from this, I also answer questions on Trailblazer community forums, volunteer at community-led events, and also help out fellow Muleys and Trailblazers to blaze their trail.
Awesome. And how did you get started with MuleSoft, and what's your favorite feature?
With MuleSoft, so I attended my very first MuleSoft, I would say, a Salesforce conference in Mumbai, and it was a MuleSoft Mumbai Forum where I had the opportunity to interact with Dev Norris. Over there, he had shown about a small demo about MuleSoft Anypoint platform and the Slack. It was an ASCII art, so maybe they can people watching this automate the series can just go and view the recently went live with the same idea, and I actually implemented it. This is where I started with my MuleSoft journey. And then in the composer specifically, all thanks to my fellow co-presenter Andrew. So when Andrew started with Composer, he started to ask questions on the Trailblazer community forum, and I started to answer them. I used to go through the documentation
Mm.
and try to visualize the solution, and I used to answer certain questions made like asked by Andrew on the forum, and this is where it grew my interest on specifically in MuleSoft Composer. Yep,
Wow, so the two of you go way back.
yep.
Great. All right. Hey, Shanks. Why do you go by Shanks, by the way?
There's a lot of Andrews in this world, a few less Shankses, so
Got it.
it's easy to remember sometimes.
So, how did you become a Muley, and how did you get into Composer?
Yeah, so I became a muley in November of last year, so this is actually probably my 1 year anniversary. The Oregon Humane Society got the MuleSoft automation package in order to start integrating our third-party platforms. And so pretty much from day one, since I do work at a nonprofit, I'm the only Salesforce admin slash anyone that knows anything about Salesforce. So it's up to me to use the tools provided by MuleSoft in order to start connecting our third-party platforms to Salesforce.
Great. And what advice do you have for people starting to learn Composer?
Just stay curious. There's a lot to learn. MuleSoft Composer is always releasing new features, which is great. So just be curious about what they're doing and how it works and how you can kind of make the system work for you and with you. Um, and yeah, hopefully I'll show you some of that here in a bit.
Great. All right. Thanks, Shanks. All right. We're back with you, Mehesh. So, can you share with us your use case and show us how you built this?
Yep, sure. Uh, yes, I'll share my screen, and here we go. So, can you confirm is my screen visible?
Yes.
Yep. Uh, what's the best way to learn about the features that Salesforce releases? It is through a certain use case, right? And getting the hands-on experience, right? So, in today we'll be going through what is invocable MuleSoft Composer, as well as how you can integrate multiple systems with MuleSoft Composer and also invoke Composer right from our Salesforce Lightning flows. So, with that, we'll start with the use case. John Smith wants to start cycling to be fit as part of his New Year resolution. He visited Jepson Cycle's website and was impressed with their 26 MTB electric bicycle. He saw an interest form and filled it out immediately. But what came as a surprise to John was that no one contacted him and he did not receive any acknowledgement or an invite from the sales associate. How can you, as a Salesforce admin, help solve this problem for Jepson Cycles? And this is the entire data flow, I would say. So if we see, we have two different systems involved. One is Salesforce, with help of which we'll be capturing the customer details, and the MuleSoft Composer, using which we'll be doing some backend automations like such as sending Google Calendar invite, as well as send a message to the Slack channel of Jepson Cycles. Starting with the MuleSoft Composer, right? Before moving into how we are using invocable MuleSoft Composer, we need to first understand MuleSoft Composer and it means. And this, at the very top, we have a trigger. This trigger basically defines when you want to trigger your MuleSoft Composer, right? For example, in Salesforce, we have 5 different types, right? First one is the screen flows. This basically defines I want to trigger this flow using screens, right? That means I'm using it to interact with my customer or the user, right? In the same way, we have a trigger. Now, this trigger basically have 3 different types. Scheduler, which means that I want to schedule this composer flow to be triggered or executed at a certain time of the day. Else, I want this composer flow to be triggered based upon an activity that is performed in an external system, such as creating a sales order in NetSuite. Else, I want to trigger this composer flow explicitly by an external system, right? Which is the invocable feature, and we will be going through the invocable feature today. Then we have the second element, which is action. Action element basically defines how so there are certain connectors available by MuleSoft or Salesforce. These connectors are basically let you interact with an external system, such as Google Calendar in our today's use case, Slack, MuleSoft RPA as well, right? So these are the way we can fetch some records or fetch data from external system or send some data to external system in order to automate our business process. Then we have if and the loop, right? Now, logically speaking, these two elements work exactly the same way. If the condition is true, then execute this set of actions. If the condition is false, then execute other set of actions. And if I fetch some records from external system, then we can loop over the records, right? Using the loop element. Now, let me take you back to my MuleSoft Composer screen, right? Now, if you see, this is my MuleSoft Composer, and I have created a new flow, right? In this, we see we have the action elements such as system event, invoke, and scheduler. And then we have these kind of connectors, right? Now, these are the out-of-the-box connectors provided by Salesforce, using which you can interact with external systems. In our today's use case, we'll be using Google Calendar and the Slack. Now, these are very easy to use such that we can easily create a connection from our composer to our external system, such as Google Calendar, Google Sheets, and so with clicks and no code, right? So, with the help of using these connectors, we'll be automating our business use case today. Now, if you see, this is our invocable MuleSoft Composer flow. I have set the trigger type as invocable. Then I expect the external system to send these parameters, right? Whenever they make a call to this MuleSoft Composer, I create a variable. Now, this variable is basically a placeholder where I'll be storing my Slack message, and then I do a basic check. Over here, I check if the customer or the lead that is created in my Salesforce org is assigned to a user or it is assigned to a queue. And this data or this should be sent by my Salesforce to my MuleSoft Composer. If it is assigned to user, what I do is I fetch the user details from Jepson Cycle's Slack workspace using the email ID, the assigned representative email ID, and then I construct a Slack message. Now, this is basically I'm using the Slack rich text editor. So, whatever annotations you see over here would be translated whenever this message is sent to the Slack channel. If it is assigned to a queue, then we use the add the year annotation, which means that I'm basically sending the notification to or making the reps which are online come to know that a new lead has been created, right? With all the necessary details over here. And you will see the actual message whenever this has been pushed to the Slack channel. Now, over here, I basically construct a Slack message. Then, as part of a process, if you remember, we also sent a Google Calendar invite, right? So I sent a Google Calendar invite with all the description, and these details are fetched or are sent by my Salesforce to the MuleSoft Composer, right? With all the details that the customer is interested in, right? Once I send a Google Calendar, then I post a message to the Slack channel of Jepson Cycles informing all the sales team that, or if it is a user, then I'll tag the user. As the representatives which are online, I would notify them a new lead has been created using this Slack connector. Now, if you see with I did not write a single line of code. All was done with the help of using connectors provided by Salesforce. And then we have certain output values as well. Now I haven't used it, but for you to use it, you just have to, for example, whenever we automate any process using MuleSoft Composer, we can send certain parameters back to our Salesforce or the system that is invoking this MuleSoft Composer, right? Such as you can send data such as your boolean string, date time, and all, right? So this is all about your invocable MuleSoft Composer flows. Now we constructed a MuleSoft Composer flow, and if you see, this is the right side of the flow diagram, and now we will be going through the left side. Right now, we'll be going through our Salesforce org, and I guess pretty much all the users may know how the Salesforce user interface looks like, right? And especially the flow builder. Now, this is the flow which I have currently using. Now over here, as we know, I'm using screen flows, and screen flows are basically meant whenever we want to interact with the user, right? A live interaction should be present. In that case, we'll be using screen flows. In the screen flows, I have certain elements, right? Like company, email, and all of the text boxes, and these will be basically used to uh, get the user details, right? Or the customer who is filling out this form. Then it's basically I then store the preferred date and interested product, right, in a variable of type lead object. And then what shall I do is I fetch the queue details which are relevant using the developer name. Once I have fetched the queue details, using this assignment element, what I do is I basically, whenever the lead is getting created, and it would be assigned to a relevant queue, right? For example, in our today's use case, John Smith is interested in 26 MTB electric bicycle. In that case, this will be assigned to electric queue, else this will be assigned to a non-electric queue, right? Then I create a lead record. Then all I have to do is now I have to send the data to my MuleSoft Composer, right? Because now MuleSoft Composer would be sending out the Google Calendar invite as well as the Slack message on the Jepson Cycles workspace, right? So what I do is I construct the body over here, the data that my MuleSoft Composer needs in order to execute successfully. Once I send in the div, I construct the body, we say, or the JSON body. Then using this invocable action, I send out the body to the MuleSoft Composer. Now you may be wondering how, how this is related to a MuleSoft Composer, right? Now, taking you back to the entire diagram of this, we created a MuleSoft Composer. Now, all we have to do is go to my Salesforce or create these name credentials. Then we also, so whenever we activate a MuleSoft Composer. So let me take you back again to my Composer screen. And if you see, whenever we activate a MuleSoft Composer, we get URL, client ID, client secret, and all of these basic information, right? With the help of which we will create a connection from my Salesforce to my MuleSoft Composer. Once I create this connection, I will basically register an external service, which in turn would register an invocable action, right? And this invocable action would help me to or help my flow to make a call out to my MuleSoft Composer. And this is how I made a call out to my MuleSoft Composer, right? Right from my Salesforce Lightning flows without writing a single line of code. Now, this is the name credential. Basically, I'm creating a connection from my Salesforce to my MuleSoft Composer. Then we have the external credentials, storing the authentication credentials in there. And then once you're using the newest way of creating these name credentials, then you also have to assign the permission set to the user, right? Or the permission to the user who will be using this composer, who using the lightning flows. And that's all we have, right? So if you see, I was able to automate this business process without writing a single line of code, right? So I use Salesforce to capture the lead details or the customer details. I create a lead. To keep it simple, I'm just creating a lead right now, but maybe we can have some checks and then create, like, make it opportunity or have a lead. Like if the customer is new, then we can directly create a lead, right? We can have such certain kind of checks. but right now I'm just making like creating a lead. So this is the Jepson Cycles website, and if you see, this is powered by my Salesforce Experience Cloud, right? Now, if you see this, everything is powered by Experience Cloud. And best part of using Experience Cloud, we have out of the box templates using which you can customize it, right? With drag and drop editors, we have it, right? So, with the help of my Experience Cloud, Jepson Cycles was able to host their all the details on the website. And now, me as a John Smith, I come and enter the details, right? So, let me enter all the details over here. John Smith, company, let me Salesforce, and email ID as this. Phone number, let me enter any random MTB. He's elect here. John Smith is interested in 26 MTB electric bicycle and will November 3, 549. And now let's wait for the magic to happen. So John Smith has entered all the details. Now, if you remember, a new lead would be created in my Salesforce wall, and then I would send a Google Calendar invite, right? Now, if you see, we received a Google Calendar invite, right, with John Smith and all the details, right? So we can see John Smith and what product he was interested in, right? So we can also see the name of the product, and then the sales rep would basically, so John Smith has the assurity that okay, I will be contacted by say so I'll be contacted by Jepson Cycles for the cycle which I'm interested in, right? Now, if you remember, as part of our business process, we also send a Slack message, right, to in the Slack channel informing my sales team. So see, we have used the at here annotation, which would basically inform all the sales team that are online, right? Or members are online, and then they can view all the details and click on this particular link, right, using which they can now start nurturing that lead or looking into the information, right? So this is the way, like, how I use lightning flows and a MuleSoft Composer flows in order to automate the entire business process without writing a single line of code. Now, for you, you'll be wondering which is the right use case to use a invocable MuleSoft Composer flows. Now, if you know, we have five different type of flows, such as lightning flows. We have five different types of lightning flows, such as screen flows, auto launch flows, record triggered flows, platform event triggered flows, and scheduled triggered flows. When it comes to screen flows, in our today's use case, we use a screen flow, right? So it is a right. So it is basically we can use invocable MuleSoft Composer flow with screen flows. When it comes to auto-learn flows, basically we are creating this reusable flow assets, right? And these may be only tied to screen flows in our today's use case, right? So because the record triggered flows, I would rather say MuleSoft Composer has the ability to understand whether an activity has been performed in Salesforce, such as creation of a lead, creation or updation of a record, or deletion of a record, right? So Composer can out of the box understand these details. So there is no requirement in order to trigger it from a record triggered flows. Then we have a platform event triggered flows as well, right? Now, MuleSoft Composer, as of now, cannot read whether this platform event has been generated or not. So in that use case, we can directly, like, we can use a platform event triggered flow, and then we can invoke our MuleSoft Composer flow. Then when it comes to schedule triggered flows, this is a yes or a no. You know why? Yes, because MuleSoft Composer provides us the ability to schedule the composer flow, but it does not provide the flexibility in order to schedule it at a certain time of the day, right? For example, if I schedule it at 2 o'clock today, so tomorrow 2 o'clock it will be executed, right? This is the max it can do, and else we can also trigger it in the interval 15, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour or so. That's all I have, and back to you, Jen.
Wow, I love that solution where you had your experience cloud, you use a screen flow and flow builder, then you have MuleSoft Composer in the background and interacting with Slack. So that's pretty cool to have like all that come together. And I love the invocable composer flows where you could just invoke them from many places. It just reminds me of subflows in Flow Builder. So really cool presentation. Thanks, Meghesh.
Thank you.
All right, so we're back with Shanks, and you mentioned that you work at the Oregon Humane Society, and you have a very unique use case. So can you share with us your business problem?
Yeah, happy to. I'll start sharing my screen now. All right. So the Oregon Humane Society has just kind of started our goal of getting to that 360-degree view of our customers. So that was kind of one of the main drivers in order for us to purchase MuleSoft. So the first part of this kind of stage is for the EasyVet integration, which is our veterinary platform. So we also have a community hospital arm, so people can come in and get care for their animals, regardless of what they're able to pay. So that was kind of our first step. Our second step is with Shelter Buddy, which is our adoption software. I actually started that integration yesterday, so that's been fun. Once we kind of have the one-way integrations from EasyVet to Salesforce and Shelter Buddy to Salesforce, then we're going to try to expand those to two-way integrations. So that way, if anything gets updated in any one of the platforms, we basically reach out to the other platforms and update it there as well. So that way, we have unified data. After that, we would go to NetSuite. MuleSoft Composer does have a default, I guess, of one of its kind of two-way integrations that's already built, which is helpful. So we will use that to kind of get that information back and forth, because currently it is a lot of manual system checks, which is tough on our dev services team. And then Digital Cheetah would probably be the last phase, which is our volunteer management software. So being able to track volunteer hours, who's volunteering actively or inactively, and so forth. All right, so we'll focus on the EasyVet integration today, because that was one of the first ones we did, and also one of I guess the most interesting ones that I've had to try to figure out. So we have to bring in the following data points, and we have to bring them in this specific order. So we have to start with our contacts, which for EasyVet, the contact, email and phone number, and address are three different API calls. So the first one is just for the name and ID for the customer. The second one is for contact details, which just gives me email and phone numbers. And then the third one being for address. And when we do this, we want to check that we are matching for first name, last name, email to see if the person already exists in our system, so that we are not creating duplicates as well. Animals is the second object, and those are connected to an account and a contact. So we first say, hey, if this animal comes in, if we can't find a matching contact, then we don't actually bring the animal in, because we have a lot of animals under our care at the Humane Society that we don't necessarily want to track because it's not attached to a patron of the hospital. Appointments will come after that, and a contact and animal are required for an appointment to be brought into Salesforce. The same with invoices, just kind of tracking the amount of spend and how often certain animals are coming in. And then the last thing we're bringing in is tags, which is just for contacts. It came in last just because scope creep is a real thing. And, that happens at times. So it's going to be connected to a contact. That's the only thing we actually look for updates for, because we'll have people that apply for, a particular tier of financial aid, let's say, and we want to know if they get approved or not. So we have to kind of update one, include the other. Part of it is the other criteria. We want to run it as often as needed. One of the things is you're limited to 200 records at a time when using the EasyVet API. So if I needed more than once a day, I would run it probably twice a day. But so far, running it basically once a day in the afternoon has worked out well. And I want to ensure that records are not missed, because you're allowed to create records basically 24 hours a day. We have a portal that you can go in and schedule appointments. So when I'm going through this process, I also have to lock in a very specific time. So that way, when an appointment gets created, let's say 10 minutes after a contact process starts, because we have so many contacts that get created every day, it takes MuleSoft, let's say 8 to 10 minutes to get through that initial process before it gets to animals and then appointments. if a contact gets created after contacts is finished processing, I'm not going to get the appointment created because the contact wasn't brought in with my initial import. And so thus I would be missing records, and that is something that we want to avoid. So to help with this, build some behind the scenes automation. So I built a custom object that I just call URL fields. Very generic because I use it for a few different things. I made an EasyVet URI field that is greater than 4 p.m. yesterday. It's a fun formula field for a Unix timestamp mixed with URI encoding for greater than. And a shout out to just Google for being able to help with that. There are websites that help you do URI encoding, so I didn't have to learn that, which is awesome. I have a get new token checkbox, and then a text field, long text field, where I stash the token for EasyVet because it expires every 8 hours. I then also have scheduled flows that run every 8 hours to get a new token from EasyVet. So that way, no matter if I wanted to run something manually, which I have to do sometimes if a process fails, or if it's the standard 4 p.m. process that runs, it will always have a fresh token that is available to be pulled into MuleSoft. So here is the actual process. It's easiest to display in a picture. So first we start in Salesforce, where a scheduled flow will trigger and it sets the get EasyVet contacts to be true. This is on my custom URL field object. That fires MuleSoft to run the get contacts process and update Salesforce and create any new records or update existing records. And then it also updates the Salesforce URL field record to say get contacts is false and get animals is true. So then when that happens, it goes back to MuleSoft, gets all the animal data, updates Salesforce. MuleSoft updates the next set of fields, so animals is false and appointments is true, which then fires the next process in MuleSoft, and kind of back and forth for invoices, and then also tags. So it does this so it gets it in a very specific order, and I'm not trying to get, contacts and animals at the same time, or contacts and appointments, or invoices and appointments at the same time. I want this very specific order to be executed, and only starting the next one once the first one or the one before it has finished. So now that we have shown that, let's go into Salesforce and see what this looks like. So this is one of my scheduled flows that will update the MuleSoft URL field to get contacts. Sorry, get new token is true. So this one runs at noon. And then when that happens, it fires off this flow, which I have it as a scheduled flow, but you could also do it to run asynchronously, where I set the body variables, which is just kind of all the custom information that is needed for the token. This fires off to the EasyVet API, and then it updates my token field, which would be in here. So only showing part of it on purpose. And there's the get new token checkbox, and then it updates this long text field. And then this is the scheduled flow that runs at 4 p.m. every day, and it just sets get EasyVet contacts to be true, which is this checkbox on my MuleSoft URL field. So it'll check that, and then it starts this MuleSoft Composer process. And this is a record triggered flow. So basically it's new or updated record where the URL field object and the record name contains MuleSoft URLs. Once this happens, I turn off an automation setting that I have. So I have on-off switches for all of my flows at the start of the flow in order to say, hey, if I want to turn this process off, I can do that in order to prevent errors. Sorry, dropped something. And it'll allow basically the flows to run without any other processes firing off, because we are on the nonprofit success pack, so NPSP, which has a lot of background things that run as a default. So when I first started this integration, I was hitting errors with contacts because multiple things were trying to run at once. when I just turned off my flows, everything ran fine. So that is what I did. And I created a specific MuleSoft EasyVet user. So that way it is only for this import that it is turning off. Any other user, including myself, the flows will work completely normally and as expected. So once I turn that off, it runs into these if-else statements. So it has one for contacts, animals, appointments, invoices, and tags, as shown earlier. And basically, if get EasyVet contacts is true, then I fire off my EasyVet API. So I bring in my EasyVet token for my get records at the start, and it is going for contacts that are created since my URI field for 4 p.m. yesterday, which is this fun bit of code here. The Unix timestamp is actually right in there, and then everything else is the URI encoding. So I pull that in again to get a very specific timestamp from when this process ran yesterday, because I want it, a specific, again, 24-hour period, not any variable in there. Make sure they're a customer, not a business, and max the limit of numbers I can bring in. And then for each of these, I'm going through a loop, and I'll actually kind of switch over to this chart view to kind of make it a little bit easier to follow along a bit. So my get EasyVet contacts, I'm making the API call to get the contacts. I'm looping my contacts. And then I'm doing another API call to get the contact details that contain the @ symbol. So basically, I'm looking for an email because, again, I want to check first name, last name, email to see if they exist or not in Salesforce. Start kind of these if-else statements. So the if contact details is not empty. And I do this a lot where I check to make sure the record's not empty, or if it is empty, I do something else. So I kind of have both routes available to myself. So if contact details exist, it loops through them. Even though there should be only one, you still loop through as part of the process. And even this contact details is limited to only bring back one record. But in order to use it, I kind of have to loop through it. And I start the error handling process here. So you'll see right here, error handler, which basically allows me to say, hey, if anything happens within this time period from like here on in the flow, then I can either continue, I can stop the flow, I can make new records, but it prevents things from breaking and stopping halfway through a list of like 200 people. So I take the information, first name, last name, email. I try to see if I get any matches in Salesforce. If I do find anybody, I'm looping through that same list and again, checking if it's empty. If it's not empty, so I found a record that matches, I update it with the EasyVet ID, and then basically come back to the next contact. If it is empty, so I have an else for when it's empty, I create a Salesforce contact, and then I get all of the EasyVet contact details. So it's another API call. And this time I'm getting in both phone numbers and email addresses. I'm looping through all these contact details, looking if it does not contain the @ symbol. So if it does contain that symbol, I update the email, go back to the next contact detail. If it's not the @ symbol, so it's implied that's a phone number, I get my EasyVet ID, EasyVet address. Again, looping the addresses, checking it's empty or not. If it is not empty, I update the contact with the phone number and address still within this loop going straight through. If it is empty, then I only update the phone number that I got back here. And then basically after the address, after I update it, once I get through the last address, I come back and do the next contact detail. After the last contact detail, I'm back up to looping through the Salesforce. And after the last Salesforce contact, going through the last details and basically all the way back to the top for all the contacts. And it goes through this process for up to 200 records, which is why it might take 10 minutes for it to process and finish processing. So that is kind of an easy way to explain it. Showing it in Composer is great. But as you can see, when you go within a loop, within a loop, within a loop, things scrunch down a bit. It's a little harder to kind of see. I'll show you at the end where I do the error handling. So at the very end, if there's any errors within that process, so whenever I started looping through everything, I can basically say there are no conditions, so just keep going. And I can either continue it or I can stop, which then it'll fail like halfway through, which is what I want to avoid. And anytime there's an error, I create what is called an admin log. So an admin log is basically just a custom object that I made. So I give it a name, an email subject, an origin. I put in all of the information that I have at the time that it failed. So this way it gives me a lot more information of where it failed and what information I need at the time of failure. So that way I can kind of dig into it. And I actually have a different MuleSoft Composer process that will run when it is basically a contact fail. It'll take the EasyVet ID for the contact, make another API call out, get the information, and actually update the contact like it should have done the first time. And I'm able to include the MuleSoft error type and description as well. So that's the full process of what it does. Again, kind of easier explained in this wonderful chart. And then at the end, you have your contact record, which would be myself, and you have the appointments that an animal has come for. You have your invoices, so anything that is associated with you and the animal. And then I have tags as well. As an example, I was approved for tier 2 funding in this use case, and all of that shows up on my contact and or account record. So it's easy to kind of reference and go through. And overall, this process has been great for us. We're able to bring in an additional 2,000 contacts to Salesforce every month, which then we kind of enter into our marketing our marketing automation in order to see if, they're okay with us sending them marketing materials every once in a while. Because as a nonprofit, obviously we are funded primarily by donations. So this has helped us increase that donation lot quite a lot. And that is all I have. So back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you, Shanks. I love seeing that you have an animal custom object in your org. I wish I had that. And love seeing MuleSoft Composer and Flow Builder joining forces, and very creative solution in solving for that back and forth between systems and getting it to behave in a specific order. So really cool.
Yeah, it was a great learning experience. Lots of fun. And Meghesh helped on this one as well. As he was mentioning, he's helped a lot when I run into issues for MuleSoft Composer or anything MuleSoft. It's been great.
Awesome. All right, so I'm sure you have questions in watching these two presenters. So we're going to transition to the Q&A section of this episode. So as a reminder, please start your questions with a Q colon so I can easily identify that for the Q&A section. All right, so while we were talking, we were asked a poll, and we asked you to rate your level of experience with MuleSoft, and 92% of you said you're just here to learn about MuleSoft Composer. So a lot of beginners out there, the majority. So thanks for participating in that interactive poll. All right, so we do have a few questions, and let me bring one up on screen. So Sarah Pilzer from snowy Vermont has a question. Do you have any tips for where we can learn more about writing JSON syntax. I struggle with getting my input-output variables to work correctly because I really don't understand JSON.
So I learned at my local community college. So my company was nice enough a few companies ago to sponsor and pay for courses for me to take HTML classes at the community college. For me, it's best to learn in person because otherwise on computers I get distracted too easily and do other stuff. So that was super helpful for myself.
Any
For me, it
advice, Mahesh?
was uh, I'm a developer basically, so I started with development, right? So for me, it would be easy to visualize JSON. But as a beginner, if you are new and want to understand JSON, I would basically tell you that it's just the key value pair, and then we just make it a string, right? It's basically a map, and then we make it into a string. So it's a key and a value, right? This is basically all the JSON is about. So it will be easier to understand if you can go through some of the examples out there, not with the complex, but with the very simple ones and day by day progress, right? And then once you get a hold of it, then you'll be able to visualize how a JSON is, and then you can use it in your flow builder as well, like using the variables.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks for that. All right. The next question comes from Max. Will the same approach work for custom build connectors like an ERP system? And this question was made, Mahesh, during your presentation.
So MuleSoft Composer does not support currently, like you cannot create custom connectors like how you do it in your AnyPoint platform. And this is the actual beauty that Salesforce provides you the connectors, and you can just directly create a connection, right? With code, you can do many things, right? Well, it gives you that flexibility, but then you have to put in a lot amount of resources, money, and everything, right? But over here, within minutes, you are able to connect with an external system, and like Salesforce Composer provides a connector to NetSuite as well, right, as an ERP system. So you can use the connectors, I would rather say, when using MuleSoft Composer.
Okay, thanks for that. All right, next question, also from Max. I think the question is, will async record triggered flow work with MuleSoft Composer?
I would say
Do
yes
you want
because
to
I've done
answer?
this.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
mean,
So as an example,
basically, wherever I was saying, wherever you can invoke or make a call out to an external system from flows, it's basically the places where you can also make a call out to MuleSoft Composer, right? For example, using a scheduled path or using an asynchronous path, right, in your record triggered flow. So you can make a call out from there, but there again, MuleSoft Composer can understand that, whether the record has been created, updated, or deleted, right? So it itself can understand these actions, and you can directly make the MuleSoft Composer execute in that way. And there will be very less use cases where you have to make a call out from your record triggered flow.
Right.
so
And
I'll add a bit on the example that I use this for is basically we have adoption records and we need to check with our adoption software, our shelter software, to see if the person submitting the request has any like red flags or things we should be aware of. So I ran it on a record trigger for an adoption record being created, an async process or run asynchronously to do the whole part of it to where like records created, it gets information from the contact, it uses that information to call out to shelter buddy to see if they have any red flags and using an invocable flow. And then with the output of that, it will take a various path, whether, we should update the contact saying they can adopt or move them into our queue for adoption. So it is doable, yes.
Great. Thanks
The
for sharing.
only problem I see is if the transaction is failed, it would be rolled back, but then it's already made a call out to MuleSoft Composer, and over there, your task or the credits have already been exhausted. Like it will be already being consumed. So there is a catch over here as well.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Max has another question. Can we use async record triggered flow to send a collection of records to MuleSoft so that it can bulk my past collection to an external system, or would I need to create separate callouts within a loop?
You can take it,
So let
Jennifer.
Meghesh take that.
Uh, So you cannot send a collection of records to MuleSoft Composer. As of now, it only supports primitive data types like you can send in string, uh, boolean, integer, date and date time, right? This is all you can do. What you can do is you can have a MuleSoft Composer from where it would fetch all of the details, right? For example, you want MuleSoft Composer understand that these are the certain records that you want to execute, right? Like run over. So you can use a composer, fetch the record using from your Salesforce using the Salesforce connector, and then you can process the records, right? And doing again, making callouts to loop is not a best practice, even if you are using Composer, because as I said, Composer it's not an it does not provide you an unlimited callouts. For example, whenever you make a callout to an external system from Composer, it has certain task or credits right attached to the price which you have paid while purchasing Composer licenses, right? So you have to be very careful whenever you're using Composer and never to use make the callouts in loops.
Great.
Andrew, your take.
Great.
Yeah, it'd be the same of wouldn't want to do it in a loop or send a collection. It's anytime I've used it, it's more of a one for one. So when a record's updated, do this thing, or making a scheduled flow so it updates a record or perhaps a group of records, but it's still sent to MuleSoft as a one by one, not a collection.
Great. Thanks for that. Just a reminder to folks, if you have a question, please start with a Q colon. And I know there's a lot of beginners out there, so don't be afraid to ask any question. Any question is good. So we're going to, I see one more in the queue, and this is from Sarah. Are there any Apex governor limit concerns with doing the contact updates inside the loops, or does MuleSoft handle limits differently than Flow?
Wonderful question, Sarah. It's not something I've run into, or actually, I didn't think of it when I built it because I didn't run into the issue. Partly, I think it being limited to 200 contacts at a time is helpful, knowing that I'm not always updating. So when I'm searching for a contact, like even if I bring in 200, if like they already exist in the system and have an easy vet ID, I'm not doing anything. I just completely skip the record. But it's also taking a long enough time period going through the loops that, 10 minutes for 200 records, I'm not hitting those Apex governor limits, fortunately. But if I was processing it faster or perhaps more records or trying to do it in a different fashion, I might. But fortunately, I've not run into that yet.
Great. All right. One question I had for the two of you, because you're now more experienced in creating composer flows. What advice would you have for yourself when you were learning MuleSoft Composer with the knowledge that you have now? stumped you all.
I mean, trailer and documentation were the best resources for me. And then yeah, we have the community as well. So there was a fun, I would say, between a fun up and down, like between me and Shanks, where it's like if someone posts the questions on Composer forum, then it's like Shank would answer it or I would answer it. Then we have this fun thing between us. We had a fun conversation around it as well. So yeah, I think documentation. There are trailered modules where you get access to the Composer simulator as well. It's not a Composer thing, but at least it would give you some uh, base level experience about how or feel about your composer is, right? So yeah, that's the three resources I would suggest.
Yeah, I would agree. Obviously, the trailhead community is great place to learn. I was fortunate enough that in like 2 jobs ago, I learned a little bit about APIs. So it makes it a little bit easier for me to understand, how to make API callouts, how to, filter what I'm asking for, how to look at what it's sending me and be able to process that. So that has been super helpful, especially because I'm only really using the HTTP connector. I don't have any native integrations that I'm using with MuleSoft Composer. So knowing a little about APIs and being able to use a program like Postman to test APIs before I bring them into Composer has been super helpful.
Right. All right. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. So thanks, Shanks and Meghesh, for answering the questions. And thanks, Sarah and Max, for asking them. All right. So let's recap what we learned in today's episode from Meghesh. What is MuleSoft Composer, how to use it, how to visualize flow automation solutions using Composer and Salesforce, and how to build end-to-end flow automation solutions with Experience Cloud, Composer, and Slack. And from Shanks, we learned how to get Salesforce and MuleSoft Composer to play nice with one another, how to pass information from Salesforce to Composer to be used in your Composer flow, and very creative workarounds to get your solution to work in a specific order. Now, join us next month in December, on December 6th. Returning to live stream is Salesforce MVP Alexandra Radovanovic and first timer Dirk Keaton. And Alex will show us how she uses a ScreenFlow for trust incident management, and Dirk will show us how he uses ScreenFlow to log interactions with his soup kitchen clients. So set a reminder on the live stream page, which is available now if you go to that URL that you see on the page. And subscribe to the Salesforce Admin's YouTube channel so that you'll be aware of new content, and we'll let you know when the live stream page is up. So now it's your turn. Check out these URLs that you see on the screen. So join the MuleSoft Composer Trailblazer community group. Also watch Meghesh's videos on YouTube to learn more about MuleSoft Composer flows, and check out the MuleSoft Composer Trail Mix on Trailhead. And we have great content produced for you admins. So visit our website, admin.salesforce.com, to find the latest blogs, podcasts, and videos. Listen to the Salesforce Admins podcast, hosted by Mike Gerhold and Jillian Bruce at all the places where you get your podcast content. And lastly, watch past episodes of Automate This via our playlist on the Salesforce Admins YouTube channel. All right, so I want to thank you both for being my guests on Automate This today. It was great. I love your use cases, and thanks for answering the questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And thank you to all of you for joining us for this Automate This episode. I look forward to seeing you on future sessions. And remember, the best way to be notified when we live stream is to set that reminder on the live stream episode page. And again, you get an email reminder the day of the event. And we'll also post upcoming sessions on all of our various social channels, so follow us on X at Salesforce Admins, Shenoy, LinkedIn, and the Trailblazer community. See you next time.